it's Abby. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reading to you some short, scary stories. If you guys like this video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. If you are new here, click the subscribe button down below and turn my post notifications so you never miss a video. I post every Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for Spooky Sundays. And other than that, let's just get right on into the video. Our first story is by the user trash_Tia. It's called 10 years ago, I lost my boyfriend and was banned from Disney for life. Tonight's the night I get him back. The park hadn't changed. The same suffocating smells twisted my gut, a reminder of the night they took him away. The crowd around me was a blur. I had dreamed of coming back. Inside the white room that had held me and called me crazy, I imagined this exact moment. The little girl was my only way back to him. I held her hand, squeezing tight. Security walked past, the breath catching in my throat. "Do you remember what to do, Ruby?" "Riley," she corrected in a grumble. The little girl cocked her head. "Yes," she said, "but where are you going?" I felt my eyes sting. "Who's your favorite Disney prince?" "Coco." "Yours?" I squeezed her hand tighter. "Flynn Rider." "He's old. Tangled is an old film." "Is it really?" "So is Coco." "Keep walking." Risking a glance at security, I ducked my head, pulling Ruby closer to me. "Here we go." Letting go of her hand, I gave her the go-ahead. When she started screaming, I backed away. Ruby was a little actress, dropping onto her knees and screaming for her real mommy. She drew the perfect amount of attention, allowing me to bleed into the shadows. The same door I stumbled through 10 years ago stood in front of me. The door from my nightmares. Therapist told me it wasn't real, so I bit all of them. It was real. The concrete tunnels hidden underneath the park, and the trap doors snatching away loved ones. Wow. I had described my experience to so many people, and all of them called me crazy. Ben's disappearance wasn't my fault, they said. Stop playing make-believe to cope. Stumbling through the same tunnel that kidnapped my boyfriend, I knew it wasn't all in my head. I remembered a room filled with Disney characters, new and old. They stuffed my poor boyfriend into a costume and forced him to dance around the park, entertaining children, before his character lost his relevancy. Who's there? A voice sent me backing into a door and slipping through the gap. Harsh light seared my eyes when I twisted around, only to find myself staring at clothes. No, not just clothes, bodies. New and old, heads and limbs and torsos scattered like doll pieces. Swallowing bile, I dropped onto my knees and crawled over to them, picking through bones and flesh that was still warm. Flynn Rider. That's who he was, who they turned him into. I found him Jesus. Wow. Okay. That's who he was, who they turned him into. I found him crushed under Elsa and Hans, forgotten and left to rot. The costume was glued to his body. One arm was missing, an eye plucked from his socket, rubber-looking skin. But it was still him. It was Ben. He was still warm somehow. When I hugged him into my chest, his body moved. Ben's eyes flickered, his expression twitching. "Hi," I whispered. Ben blinked, his lips splitting into a grin, congealed blood welling from his nose. "You broke my smolder." Gesundheit. "Listen, Blondie. Not Ben. Flynn." Close enough. Jesus. I have too many thoughts right now. Like, the amount of shocking sentences in this story. I'm sorry, what? Like, they kidnap people to become characters at the park? Like, what do you mean, heads and limbs and torsos scattered? They chop them up? And now this guy thinks he's Flynn Rider? Jesus! That was a wild one to start out on. Okay. Our next story is by the user Forgotten Well. And it's called My Mother-in-Law Always Hated Me. That's not good. On my wedding day, she took me aside. "He'll never be yours. I'm the most important woman in the world to him. Know your place." That is the worst kind of mother-in-law. We went to Cabo San Lucas for our honeymoon. And when we entered the resort lobby, my mother-in-law was there waiting for us. When my husband joined the military, she was furious she couldn't live in the housing with him. So she rented an apartment outside the base so she could see him every day. She couldn't follow him on his tour of duty in Afghanistan, so she preoccupied her time by constantly messaging me in extravagant detail how I'm not good enough for her son. I'm sorry, no man is worth that. When he returned, we bought a house. Guess who bought the house across the street? There were big windows in the front of the house, so you could always see her coming up to ring the doorbell and invite her son over for dinner. And invite just her son over for dinner. When his nightmare started, she insisted he move in with her. She had been calming his nightmares since he was a child. This was different. The PTSD was destroying him. He would stay up half the night in a bulletproof vest, a pistol in one hand and a grenade in the other. When he'd finally pass out, the nightmares would wake him up screaming. Then one day I came home and he'd killed himself. My mother-in-law insisted he be buried in the cemetery plot she bought, next to a gravestone with her name and no space for me. But I was the executor of his will. I cremated him. I put the urn with his ashes right in front of the living room by the big windows in the front of the house, right where it'd be easy for her to see. Then one morning I woke up to the sound of the window breaking. I went down and the urn was missing. I looked out the big window across the street to my mother-in-law's house and waited. From her bedroom window there was a bright flash, followed by a horrifying boom and glass shattering. I had rigged my husband's grenade in the urn. When she took the top off to make sure his ashes were in there, she pulled the pin. Payback for all the misery she'd caused me. But I think she won in the end. Now she's with her son. Okay, we're 2 for 2 this video. I didn't see that coming either. Oh my god. I mean, she may or may not have gotten what she deserved. The next story is by the user trash_Tia, and it's called Mrs. Carrington Said, Simon Says Stop, So We Stopped. Mrs. Carrington lost her smile, just like all the other teachers who taught us. I was wondering when she was going to snap too. I tallied it in my notebook how many times her voice broke, her hands tightened into fists when Rowan asked if she brushed her hair. After days and then weeks of waiting, our teacher lost her mind on a random Tuesday when it was raining. She was writing a poem when Summer Carlisle stood up. Summer bullied me for weeks because I didn't get skincare products for Christmas. I did ask, but my mom laughed at me. For what skin, Ruby? You're 9 years old. Good mother. Mrs. Carrington, Summer mocked. How old are you again? Our teacher's lip pricked. I am 31, Summer. Ew, Summer pulled a face. Isn't 30, like, super old? Mrs. Carrington stopped writing when the class erupted into laughter. Why don't we play Simon Says? She stepped forward, her dark eyes drinking all of us in. That moment, I felt the air around me still. Her voice slammed into me like a wave of water. Simon Says, stop. We did stop. I stopped. I could feel the breath in my lungs. I was still breathing, still alive, still conscious and looking at my teacher, but I had stopped. I thought it was a joke. But Mrs. Carrington didn't say, Simon Says go. She didn't end the game. I stopped for hours, then days, then weeks. Seasons started to change in the corner of my eye, but I was always there. Always glued to my seat. Rain hit the windows. The sun baked into the back of my neck. I was aware of my hair growing out long, and then short, and then in a ponytail, like an invisible me was continuing on while I had stopped. I grew taller. I sensed my body twist and contort, my skin growing itchy. I felt emotions, new ones I didn't understand. I felt anger and frustration, pain and sadness, but then came love. Love felt like warm water coming over me. Heartbreak felt like suffocating. Sometimes I disassociated. I could see the other kids. Summer didn't look like 9 years old anymore. Jack looked like my older brother. I can't remember when I stopped screaming, stopped hammering on the barrier inside my mind, begging to die, to be released from Simon Says. Mrs. Carrington's voice did finally hit us. Simon Says, go. I blinked rapidly. I was standing on a stage wearing a graduation gown. Class of 2034. I could see my mom in the audience. I didn't remember Mommy having wrinkles. When the crowd had stopped clapping, my class seemed to snap out of it. Rowan dropped to his knees. Summer started screaming, an agonizing wail rattling in my ears. Her fingers carved into her face, ripping at her hair. I dropped my diploma, already screaming for my mother. Wrapping my arms around her, I was shaking. Mommy, I whispered, I'm old. I feel like this is just like a metaphor for how school life feels. That you're just like going through the motions and like just doing what you're told and not really like living. I mean, I started doing online school my sophomore year of high school. So I didn't go to all of high school. Even thinking back to like middle school and elementary school, it's like it feels like you're just going through the motions and trying to like finish out each year to be done with school. Okay, the next story is by the user By Wonderful, and it's called My Wife Keeps Introducing Me to People Who Aren't There. I thought she was playing a practical joke the first time she did it. I was in the kitchen when she walked in the front door mid-conversation. She gave a brief pause and introduced me to no one, apparently called Jeff. I gave her a quizzical glance, but she carried on the conversation, going as far as to pause, as if waiting for the other person to reply. Really, Ian? You can't even say hello? There's no one there, I cried. We didn't talk for a few days, and then on the weekend she asked if I wanted to go have some drinks with some friends. I was still cranky, but agreed. She was my wife. We arrived to an empty apartment. She told me not to bother knocking, my wife smiled as she let herself into the apartment. Said she'd never hear us knocking over all the chatter. My heart began to race as I watched my wife lean down, hugging people who were not there. She gave names of who was sitting in each empty chair. I stared around the empty room, dazed. I gingerly took a seat in what I was hoping was an empty chair. Ah, you know what I mean. And tried to play along with my wife. It happened again the next week. An art gallery opening, her friend's exhibit. I started to lose it when I was stood in an empty gallery, looking at empty picture frames. When I heard my wife ooh and ah over an empty frame, I couldn't contain myself any longer. What's gotten into you? She hissed. I played along to the start, but this is just a joke. There's no one in the room. Her face changed to worry. I haven't been playing any practical joke on you, I swear. I think you need to go to the doctor. My wife wouldn't let up about me seeing a doctor, so I gave in, and found myself sitting in an empty doctor's office, my wife nodding along to an empty office chair. A week or so later, I arrived home to my wife preparing dinner in our kitchen. She gave me a sheepish smile, a kiss on my cheek, and told me she was sorry for messing with me. She was my wife, and I loved her. Chris was one of my college buddies. We had recently reconnected, and he had invited me and the wife over for dinner. I greeted Chris and introduced him to my wife. We made some small talk. My wife was reserved, and I tried to include her more in the conversation. After a while, Chris gave a nervous laugh and asked if everything was okay. He looked awkward, his eyes not quite meeting mine. It's just that there's no one there. My wife tells me she's real. I can feel the warmth of her skin against mine. She's my wife. I believe her. So where's he getting these empty apartments and art galleries to go to? I thought he was, he is crazy, but I thought he was crazy in the sense of somehow he can't see all these people that his wife is genuinely talking to. Not that she was crazy in imagining people. I thought he was crazy. He's crazy in a different way than I expected. Okay, our next story is by the user Buried by the Sound, and it's called Do You Still Love Me? Do you still love me? She asked with tears welling in her eyes. She was 2 years old and had spilled her juice on our brand new rug. I replied, of course, it was an accident and I will always love you, as I did my best to clean it up before the stain became permanent. Do you still love me? She asked, tears streaming from her face. She was 4 years old and in a tantrum smashed my picture frame given to me by my recently passed mother. I am very angry with you, my love, but nothing will ever make me stop loving you. I swept the glass away before it cut anyone. Do you still love me? My 9-year-old choked the words out as she held her dead hamster, shaken a little too hard in his ball. I will always love you. We can't be so rough with our pets, I replied, and disposed of the hamster before my wife returned home. Do you still love me? She said, 14 now and stoic, standing still with my wife's blood still on the knife she held just above my chest as she stared at me. I will always love you, I said softly as I looked into her eyes. Do you still love me? She said through the phone. She was an old 21, thin with tired eyes. The glass separated us, but her voice was the same. I will always love you, I whispered into the phone before the guards took me away. A father looks after his daughter. Always. I'm sorry, I start questioning things when she shook the hamster to death. I certainly will not be taking the fall for someone else after they killed someone. Are you out of your mind? Our final story of the video is by the user cbenson1273, and it's called A Good Life. Are you still there? Asked Kathy, weakly unable to see me due to the disease that has robbed her of her vision. I'm here, my love. I'm cold. I walked to the other side of the small room of the house that's been our home for decades and retrieved her favorite blanket. I remember buying it for her from a market in Madrid years ago when we were young. I placed the blanket gently over her supine form. Is that better? Much, she replies, shivering. Thank you. Of course, anything for my angel. She says nothing for the next few minutes, and we enjoy a comfortable silence. We have long since passed the point where we need words to fill the empty space. Do you think Henry's coming tomorrow? I don't know, my love. I'm sure he'll reach out when he can. But it feels like forever since we've seen him. I know he has his own family in California now, but he's our son. Shouldn't he still make time for us? She asked plaintively. Oh, now, I'm sure he'll still want to see us, I reassure her. You know how life is. Remember when we first got together? I do, she said, smiling, and for a moment I could swear I was looking at the 17-year-old girl I first met all those years ago. Nothing else in the world mattered. We only had eyes for each other. You wouldn't begrudge Henry the same experience, would you? Of course not, she conceded. I just miss him. So do I said, my voice thick with emotion. But we all have our own paths to take. We spend the day doing nothing in particular. Lying around, telling old stories, reliving happy times. It strikes me again, as it has in the past, how much of our lives we spent together and what wonderful lives they've been. I'm truly a lucky man. She coughs and covers her mouth with her hand. Are you all right, I ask? Fine, she says, just a dry throat. I step into the kitchen and pour her a cup of the tea I made earlier. Here, I say as I return and place it carefully in her hands. Drink this. She takes a long sip and smiles at me, always taking such good care of me. Thank you, my love. You're welcome, always. With that, I lie down in the bed next to her as the sun sets. The next morning, as she continues to sleep, I rise, gather a blanket, and sit in my favorite chair before our living room window. From there, I look out at the skies, a fire in the darkness. I recall the news of California completely breaking off and falling into the sea, and hope that Henry died quickly. As I see the mile-high wave getting closer, I return to lie down with Kathy. Perhaps the life we awake in will be even better than this one. I don't like this. Well, it was a good story. Kind of sad rather than scary. But I don't like it because I'm Henry in this story, and if California breaks off, I'm sinking into the ocean. I guess the silver lining is that she won't know that they're about to die too. Okay, well, on that note, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what your favorite story was and why. I think the first two like blew me away, but I did really enjoy all of them. So let me know what you guys' favorite was. If you guys like this video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. If you are new here, click the subscribe button down below and turn my post notifications so you never miss a video. I post every Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for Spooky Sundays. And again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week. Bye.